to review the semifinals that took place this past weekend in the Chicagoland area on a whole new episode of Inside the Huddle. Brian Chimino back with you with Beth Long of Fox Sports and Scout.com. We got to start in Class 8A. Two semifinals full of insanity. And let's start with the afternoon kickoff between the Stevenson Patriots and Glenbard West. Beth, I don't know if this was a great defensive battle or a very sloppy game. 9 turnovers between the two teams. The one that mattered the most was an interception in the end zone by Stevenson to clinch the 7-3 win and advancing on to the state title game. Jack Joseph literally stretching for the game-winning touchdown with 58 seconds left.
There was a lot of controversy about that game-winning touchdown, too. And you know what? We've seen pictures. It certainly looked like a touchdown to me, and that's what put Stevenson over the top. This was the game, like we mentioned last week, we've been waiting for this all year. Number 1 versus number 2. A shame it couldn't have happened in the state championship game. I mean, like you said, there were 9 turnovers. Willie Bourbon threw 4 interceptions, 3 straight series of picks before he marched them down the field 88 yards for the game-winning touchdown. He connected 3 times with Jack Sorensen on that drive for 35 yards. And they kind of switched the tempo a little bit up, went to a no-huddle offense, started just controlling the tempo of the game, and that seemed to be the difference for Stevenson. Glenbard West, we all know the hitters have a fantastic defense. And I think the one thing this game showed me was Bourbon's quarterback mentality and the fact that, yeah, he wasn't playing well. 4 interceptions, that's not good, but he still put it together and put this team, put 7 points on the board, and that's what made the difference for the Patriots. That, I think, bodes well as they move into the state championship game. But they're going to be taking on Homewood Flossmoor, and HF is not a team that you want to give up that many turnovers to. So
she spoiled the next one. Homewood Flossmoor knocking off Simeon in just a great football game, 35-28. Last week in the quarterfinals, the Harley Hampton twins only combined for about 80 yards, but they went off against Simeon, over 200 yards rushing combined to advance on to their first state championship game since 1994.
And we didn't mention this with Stevenson, but they've never won a state championship. And it's been a while, like you said, 1994, since Homewood Flossmoor has been in that state title game too. So it's certainly going to be a matchup of 2 programs that definitely deserve to be there. And one of them is going to be incredibly happy finally taking home that state title. Like you said, the Harley Hampton twins, there are MVPs this week. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. They racked up the touchdowns, 5 between the 2 of them. Devontae Harley Hampton went 14 carries for 76 yards and 3 touchdowns. Deontay Harley Hampton, 20 carries for 133 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's interesting, this was a game that I was at, to see how these 2 are used live. And I saw them week 1 of the season as well, and they definitely are being used at different capacity, a much larger capacity than they were at that point. So those 2 are very fun to watch and should make for a pretty fun state title game. Got to touch on Simeon, though. They did get rolling towards the second half of the game, tied everything up. They had a chance to tie it up again to go to overtime in the final seconds of the game. There's good news for the Wolverines. Sure, they're losing a lot of their top playmakers. They're losing Matt Fleming. He's a senior. Deion Earls Jr. is a senior. Quarterback Simone Watkins. But a lot of the pieces on their offensive line, Kevin Agee and Terrell Macklin-Dupree, they're both like 6'4", 6'5", 300-pounders. They're only juniors. They'll be back next year, along with linebacker Antonio Crosby, who made some really big plays throughout the playoffs, too.
In Class 7A, those semifinals are pretty much the exact opposite of Class 8A. A couple of blowouts. First off with Providence, proving no problem beating a team for the second time this season. They rolled over Mount Carmel 42-21. There was a question if Miles Boykin would play for the Celtics, but he played, and he did pretty much everything except sack the opposing quarterback.
One quote that kind of struck me about Boykin was the fact that you game plan against him. He's that rare of a talent. And I would agree. I mean, like Brian mentioned, he threw for a touchdown. He caught a touchdown. He went 6 catches for 121 yards. Those are not shabby stats. Certainly after being out, he had surgery on his hand the week before, missed that 1 game, and just came back with a vengeance, it sounded like. It was a great run by Carmel. I mean, they were shorthanded. Their running backs were not healthy and not what they wanted. They relied on Jaquan Bunting, who kind of got the scoring started for them, who really hasn't played a lot of running backs since week 1 for the Caravan. And so that was a problem. One of their top strengths, the running back core, wasn't 100%. But nonetheless, Carmel had a great season and came back from a very improbable run. If you're a Caravan fan, you've got to be pretty proud of this team. Miles Boykin, though, key to the game, of course, not surprising. Justin Hunniford kind of continues to go under the radar and be great. 12 for 16 for 192 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's also fantastic. That's a great completion rate. He's super efficient. And I think as long as Hunniford continues to play efficient ball and looks to the entire core of his explosive offense, including Boykin. This one's going to be real interesting.
The other semifinal in Class 7A, we haven't really talked about Cary Grove, the number 3 team in the Super 25, too much. Their closest game so far this year has been a 10-point win in Week 1. They have not been challenged ever since then, and they were not challenged in the semifinals. 41-7 over the Libertyville Wildcats. And Tyler Pennington, a sophomore, 118 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns. Another underclassman doing things.
I had a chance to go out and see Cary Grove practice a few times this season, saw them play against Grays Lake North. Things that come to mind about the Trojans offense. They're solid, they're powerful, and they're strangely explosive. Because you don't think, when you think Cary Grove, they're going to run the ball down your throats. You know that. And everyone knows that faces them. And they still somehow find a way to make explosive plays. Part of that is because of the offensive line, led by Trevor Ruland, who's headed to Notre Dame, and also Michael Gomez, another prospect on the offensive line. Both of them have started for multiple years. They're both great-sized athletes. Ruland is probably the most aggressive and just going to flatten you in the dirt offensive lineman that I've seen in the last several years here in Illinois. He's a special talent, certainly. Got to give a shout out though to Libertyville. They had a great season. Quarterback Riley Lees led them, and I think we'll be exciting to see him in the coming year as well. And this one was really all about momentum, getting the tempo under control, and Libertyville couldn't seize that momentum. It's really hard to do against a team like Cary Grove, but anytime you're going to play them close, you have to dictate the momentum.
And finally, down in Class 4A, Phillips continues their historic run. They're advancing on to the state championship game with a 26-6 win over Cole City. And Dwayne Collins, he's like, hey, I want to be a candidate for Player of the Year, Beth.
Yeah, Dwayne Collins, we've been talking about him all year, and you know what? He is making a really strong case to be that Player of the Year. This is the first time a CPS team has made it to the state finals since the 1982 Robeson Raiders, who, that is a long time ago, and it's about time another one has a chance to win the state title. Robeson did not win. They lost when they went downstate. This time, Phillips has a great shot. They're going to be taking on Rochester, and you can definitely see us talk about more of that matchup a little bit later on in the week on the preview for the state championships. Collins came out, scored the first 2 touchdowns, 105 yards rushing on 10 carries in the first half. It's just almost impossible to stop. A quote that I thought was very interesting was from Cole City's coach. He said, this is just a different level of athlete than we've seen all year. And I have to agree, because even if Collins isn't getting things fired up, which he's pretty much not had a problem doing all year, they have plenty of other athletes. Collins had a 41-yard touchdown throw to Omani Jones, who's a linebacker who had 11 tackles in the linebacker position. He also, caught the touchdown from the tight end spot. Jamal Brown, another kid who's going to be headed to play college ball at Illinois State, had an interception and was hitting harder than almost anybody I've seen all season. It was very clear that this team wants to win, wanted to play for that state title, and now they're going to get the chance to do it.
And that'll do it for this semifinal review edition of Inside the Huddle. And just like Beth said, check back later in the week for a state championship preview edition of Inside the Huddle. 5 huge matchups taking place down in Champaign. For Beth Long, I'm Brian Chimino. We'll see you later.